Hey, so I'm Kira Carey and welcome to Cloudsmith's monthly webinar on all things DevOps and supply chain security. And today's topic is the who, what, where, and why of commercial software. So before I get started, a few housekeeping notes. We have prizes, so wait till the end to see if you've won. Hillary, our very own Hillary, is working behind the scenes, checking all the platforms that we're streaming on: LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and our webinar platform. So if you have any questions, please post in and she'll hand them over to me. We also are going to be running a poll, but don't worry that you can't click the poll thing. You can just use whatever your platform you're watching us on. So again, our topic is the who, what, where, and why of open source commercial. So open source in general is incredibly positive. Without projects like Debian, Nginx, Kubernetes, Postgres, Backstage, innovation will be painfully slow. I don't think anybody wants to reinvent Kubernetes again. So bringing these technologies into your tech stack is free, but it's free like a puppy, and they need a lot of loving care. So it requires a lot of engineering experience, maintenance, and infrastructure. And many companies bridge the gap by facilitating the innovation and transparency that open source brings without the engineering and infrastructure needed to host and maintain the open source. So, and they often provide that through software as a service. And we have representatives from two such companies, EDB and Roadie, and that we'll be talking to today. So this is a great time to bring on our two guests. And they are Letitia Avro and David Chute.
Hey, Kira. Great to be here.
I'll give you a bit of an introduction. So Letitia is the field CTO in EDB. She's a Postgres expert, and she's been named the most influential person in the database community this year. She's a co-founder of Postgres Women, and she's a contributor to Postgres. And we have David. He's the founder of Roadie, which is a SaaS Backstage. Backstage is an open source service catalog that automatically tracks your microservices, and Roadie provides this as SaaS, and it's the easiest way to get Backstage. So Letitia, I have a few questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So how did you have nearly 20 years experience. I don't want to age you or anything in with the Postgres community. How did you get started?
Well, I will remember that day for all my life. I was coming back from a maternity leave, and it was difficult to adjust to all the changes that came when I was not there. And my boss came into my office saying, "I'm forced to do it. Nobody will be interested, but there is a DBA job opening in our company." And 2 seconds before, I was in his office saying, "I want that job." And the company needed a Postgres DBA, so that's why I went into Postgres first. Of course, I learned other engine, Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, but I first learned with Postgres, and I fell in love with Postgres.
Oh, brilliant!
First.
And why did you start at Postgres Women?
So that's also a funny story. I was at FOSDEM in the Postgres dev room, and there was only one woman presenting for the whole day. And I was just sitting near another woman, and we were discussing about how a shame it was that there was only one woman presenting for the whole day. And she said that she had found out the same thing. She felt the same way. So she decided to do her part. And just she was a little afraid, but a little excited at the same time that she will be presenting her first talk 2 months after. I said, wow, she's so brave. But if she can do it, I can do it too. And after that, we found out that women might need a little help to go on stage, because maybe they think that what they think is not valuable, but it is. Anybody's point of view is valuable. So my evil plan for Postgres Women is to get women go to conference talk events so that they can meet people it's very good for their career, but also the next step of the evil plan is to put them on stage.
Ah, so you bring them in, maybe offer them a free lunch, and then that's going to get me every time. And David, so you're the founder of Roadie. When did Roadie start?
Roadie started about 2 years ago, and before I kicked off Roadie, I was a infrastructure product manager at Workday, which is a large HR technology company. And I actually worked on service catalogs and developer portals at Workday, so helping to drive adoption of those technologies inside the company. And that was what initially got me interested in the space and helped me understand what kind of business problems that software catalogs could solve.
Yeah, and so did the developers love it when you introduced that in Roadie and you're like, wait a second.
So yeah, when we were in Workday, we built this technology called the registry, and it wasn't, let's say, an overnight success. It certainly needed a bit of babysitting and needed some help to drive adoption throughout the company. But it solved some big challenges there, and eventually was quite a well-loved product inside the company. So at a certain point, I kind of saw how effective it was being, and I decided I was going to leave Workday and start my own company. It's something I've always wanted to do ever since I first wrote my line of code about 10 years ago. And so, yeah, handed in my notice in the first lockdown of the pandemic back in March or April 2020, and took the leap into trying to build something from scratch.
Wow, it's so brave. Like when the pandemic starts, then you're like, oh, I know what I want to do.
Yes, when you know, right?
Yeah.
And the even worse, the first thing that happened after I handed in my notice in Workday to start building a proprietary software catalog was that Spotify open source Backstage pretty much like the next day. And so I had this terrifying moment where I had just quit my job to build a product, and Spotify had open sourced my entire product vision the very next day.
They took the wind out of your sails for a little bit until you realized, wait a second.
Yeah, there was almost a scramble to try and get my old job back. But it caused me to go and talk to the team at Spotify and try and understand what they were trying to accomplish, and understand their vision and whether or not Roadie could be a part of it, although it wasn't called Roadie at that point. But they seemed excited to have a commercial company operating in the space and to help them drive adoption of Backstage. And so it seemed like our stars were aligned in that way.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'll get started on the topic. It's the who, what, where, why of open source commercial. So I thought the first question is like, why do companies choose EDB or Roadie over their open source alternatives? And I'll give that to Letitia.
Well, the main reason is for support and SLA, because even though the Postgres community is pretty reactive and it's very often that bugs are fixed in the next 24 hours, there is no guarantee. So with a company behind, it's easier, even though the company won't be able to push a bug fix into the Postgres community if the Postgres community thinks it's not good enough. It will, but what we could do in that case is create a fork if the customer really needs it urgently. But most of the time, we have really we know the community because we all work together for now a long time, and so we discuss together, and normally it works well. It's just that the open source community does not provide any support and SLA, which is mandatory for some companies.
Yeah, and Jose used to call you Roadie, David. And Roadie is that where do companies come to you first? Because I suppose it might be a little bit different, Roadie, because like companies need databases and they've had them for an awfully long time, but maybe they're coming to you before they have a service catalog, or how do you find it?
Yeah, I'm glad to see that my branding is working and I'm merging with the company. Yeah, so you're right that our customers are early on their adoption journey of Backstage because it's still a relatively new technology and still relatively immature compared to something like Postgres. But there's really kind of 5 reasons why people will choose us. The first one is just that they might be faster getting to production. So Backstage is kind of complex to set up, especially if you don't have native TypeScript expertise in your team. And so you can kind of choose between spending multiple weeks self-hosting, which might be the right thing to do, or you can come to Roadie and if you put your mind to it, you can get set up in a few hours. There's also reduced ongoing maintenance, so people don't have to spend their engineering time upgrading Backstage every month. And that just means that people can focus on what they do best or adding value to it in a different way to their company. We also, I would like to think, manage better uptime and mean time to resolve for Backstage issues than most self-hosted teams. So if you imagine, a DevOps team who are looking after lots of different tools, if there is an incident, it can often just take some time just to get up to speed with how to fix the problem inside Backstage. You might be learning the code base kind of from scratch, whereas we're used to running Backstage at scale over a large number of different companies. We're experts in the code base at this point. And so we just have a better ability to fix issues that happen much more quickly. Fourth thing I mentioned is just the knowledge sharing and the support that comes with working with Roadie. So we've rolled out Backstage now at multiple dozens of companies, and we've built up some expertise over time that we can apply to the next customer who comes along. So they might be marginally faster than the first customer we work with. We have some internal tools that we have rolled out inside these companies as time has gone on. And so every customer who comes along, it gets that advantage as well. And they probably get adoption faster than they would if they were self-hosting Backstage. And then the last thing I would just mention is that we are building proprietary features on top of Backstage. So as we have rolled out Backstage at many organizations, as soon as people start realizing what software they have because they've cataloged it in Backstage, the next question is typically, well, how do I make sure this stuff is mature, or how do I make sure it's secure or operable? And so they want us to play a role in solving that problem or answering those questions. And so that's kind of naturally driven us to adding extra technologies on top of Backstage to help solve business problems inside those organizations.
Yeah, and Letitia, that's probably something similar with EDB, where you offer features outside of the Postgres.
Yes,
open source.
we have a fork of Postgres which was meant to facilitate migration from Oracle. So we have a layer of Oracle compatibility, which helps not having to rewrite everything you have to make it work under our version of Postgres. We also provide services, of course, because Postgres runs well, but you might want high availability, you might want backups, things like that. And designing a backup policy, designing a service disruption policy, that's not easy. It needs to be thought, because you don't want to spend too much money. You don't want to miss something and risk having huge availability disruptions, things like that. So we have services. We also do audits, tuning, and we do whatever you might need around Postgres, because we have pre-packaged services, but we can also do custom packages really defined for your special use case.
Oh, cool. And so
I like to say we are like haute couture for database.
You had to be like, bring a little bit of French.
Yes.
And so are some of these services, would they be considered sort of consultancy when you're talking about tuning, when you talk about like that experience of a service catalog? Is that, do you provide it as a consultancy, or is it like as part of the SLA? Is that?
It's part of consultancy. SLA is when you have a problem. Consultancy is to prevent the problems to happen.
Okay. Yeah, that's a nice one-liner there. And what about metrics? Because I know metrics seems to be a differentiator with enterprise kind of enterprise products, do you guys provide metrics for your customers to let them know how, like, especially if there's so much around databases, is that something that's extra to Postgres, or what do you think?
The Postgres project does only Postgres, and that's pretty narrow, because if you look at other database products like Oracle, they do a lot of steps that Postgres does not do. For example, they have a storage layer. Postgres will never do that. We rely on the operating system for storage. And so sometimes you might want things around it, like we have a monitoring system that is designed to first try to alert before it stops, because it's pretty hard when Postgres stops on the go like that. Normally it sends warnings before, so we catch those warnings, but also you will have the nice graphs bosses like to see, like the number of transactions, the number of queries, the slow queries, things like that. Yes, we have a monitoring tool. It's closed sourced, and it's called PEM, Postgres Enterprise Manager.
And what about Backstage, David? Is it like, because there's so much metrics around developer productivity, I'm sure you offer stuff like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Both on the metric side, but also product analytics. So one of the first questions our customers typically ask is, well, how do I know if this is being successful inside my organization? And everybody wants to answer that question. And it's actually typically the same set of product analytics that you need to look at in each different customer. And we spent a bit of time, or invested some time, in figuring out what those correct metrics to look at are. And we share them directly with our customers. So it's an example of something that they get out of the box straight away when they use Roadie, but they might have to configure it themselves, or collect the data themselves, or analyze the data themselves if they self-host.
Oh, cool. And let's go to the poll, because it's sort of around this whole topic of the first question. Be like, so why choose an enterprise product based on open source over building and running the open source directly? So I gave people a few different options. Why would they choose reduced overall cost, increased security of your supply chain? That's actually the highest. High availability, support and SLAs, or I prefer to run my open source directly, which is not many people want to do. So the increased security of your supply chain, that's kind of interesting. And do you find that like a big part of your offering is to keep up to date with updating your dependencies and making sure you're secured? Is that a huge push to for people to buy Roadie or EDB? David, I'll just
I'll take that. Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of pleasantly surprised by the answers of the poll there. I like your audience there. They seem to
they're singing your tune, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. These are my people. Yeah, so security is definitely an important reason to use Roadie. So we are diligent on staying up to date with the latest Backstage releases in a way that I think most companies that self-host don't necessarily do. So, and there's multiple parts to that. There's firstly tracking and understanding what's in every release. And these are big chunky releases with lots of different open source pull requests in them. And so even that can be a challenge, and we have to invest time in that. Then there's actually performing the upgrades to bring in the patches and fixes and upgrade libraries. And that takes time, and sometimes it can go wrong, and you can cause outages when you're doing upgrades, etc. if you're not doing them regularly. We're doing them every single month, and so we kind of built up a bit of automation and some process around that to try and ensure that it doesn't go wrong. And so, yeah, I think you're much more likely to be up to date with the latest Backstage releases and features if you're using Roadie than if you're self-hosting, and security kind of comes along naturally with that. We also do dedicated pen testing against our SaaS Backstage instances, which some companies may not think to do. But yeah, we have external third parties try to hack Roadie, and then we use that to guide our security posture.
Oh, it is that part of like some of the Like, I know you're SOC 2 compliant. Is that part of that, or is that just separate, kind of a extra?
It's not part of SOC 2 Type 2 as far as I know. I might be wrong on that, but because there's hundreds of rules that are part of SOC 2, which I don't know all off the top of my head, but we do have SOC 2 Type 2, and as far as I know, pen testing is not part of that. It's something extra that we thought was important, just because we're engineers at the end of the day, and we'll code bugs into the system, and we want somebody else verifying that what we're doing is secure.
Yeah, and Letitia, I'm sure like staying up to date and secure is a huge part of EDB.
Yes, and Postgres releases one major version per year, which is a lot, and at least one minor version per quarter. So it's certainly a challenge when you choose Postgres to keep up to date, because only 5 major versions are maintained. Meaning, if you're in an out-of-date version and security failure is found, then you won't get a patch. So that's a problem for our customers. We're helping the best we can. But regarding the security of the supply chain, as Postgres is a very old project with an old-fashioned way of doing things. We don't have a GitHub. Well, we do have a mirror GitHub, but it's not the official GitHub of Postgres. We host our own Git tool. We are our own web interface for our Git. You can't do pull requests. You have to create your patch with Git patch and send it in the mailing list. So very old-fashioned. And each patch is reviewed thoroughly by all our developers and can't be committed if it's not been reviewed, so that the probability that nasty code being added to Postgres is low.
Yeah, it's like the opposite to NPM. It's like
it's sometimes infuriating. My first patch was just a documentation patch with a copy paste from one page to another, and it took 6 months. But
oh wow,
okay. We have a very stable code.
Oh, that's really interesting. And how, I know earlier you talked about how there's Postgres and EDB, there's a lot of overlap between the two communities. How do you, I suppose it would be really hard for another company to come in because they don't have those relationships.
There are other companies. That's the beauty of Postgres. No company owns Postgres, and the Postgres community makes sure that there was not only one company. So you have other companies at EDB offering support. You can go to postgresql.org. There is a support tab, and then you will find a long list of companies that can do support for Postgres.
Oh, cool. And how do you maintain those relationships and those communities? Like, say you've decided, oh, Postgres needs this new feature. Is it difficult to get that included into Postgres? I suppose you were talking about the process there. It is difficult.
Yes, but so the first thing you need to do is just write an email explaining your idea before writing everything, because we don't want you to waste some time if people object to your idea. So first, explain your idea and send an email explaining your idea. There is another way to do that. There is this huge event, well, not that huge, but it's most popular event for Postgres developer in Ottawa in May, where we have unconfirmed session where you can explain new ideas, doing some brainstorm with others about how we could solve this problem. Everyone can submit topics, and after we vote on the topics, and we have 6 to 7 sessions of unconference where we can discuss ideas. And the other way to do that is having beers.
Yeah. It's always a good way.
Yes.
And what about and David, what about yourself? How do Roadie backstage? How do they communicate with the maintainers and the and your company? Is that a happy relationship?
Yeah, well, the process for contributing to Backstage is slightly simpler, I would hazard a guess, than for Postgres. I mean, obviously, Postgres is extremely critical infrastructure in many different companies, and it's good that they prioritize stability. In Backstage, because it's more modern and because it's just more, it was created more recently, there is a GitHub project, there's a vibrant community, there's a Discord with 7,000 people in it. There's a lot of different ways to talk to the community, and we try to contribute every way that we can. I think that there is a good recognition from Spotify, who are the main caretakers of the project, that they want to build up a commercial ecosystem which is vibrant and allows for lots of different business models to exist, because that's how you build a platform that's going to last into the future. It's relatively easy to open source something and just kind of strip all the profit from it very quickly, but it's not going to become a healthy kind of flower garden where lots of different companies can bloom. And so, yeah, they are prioritizing that. We're doing our part by contributing as much as we can. Lots of different ways, code, product management ideas. I mean, we have a direct line of feedback with our customers who are using Backstage every single day. And so we try and feed as many ideas as we can back to the maintainers so that they can incorporate them into their thinking. There's also just the marketing efforts that we do, right? We talk a lot about how Backstage can be used and what it's good at. And that helps spread awareness and drive adoption and increase the size of the community for everybody.
Cool. And you were at was it the first Backstage conference since the pandemic?
First one ever. First Backstage conference was at KubeCon North America, I think 3 weeks ago. And we were there. We co-sponsored and co-hosted it alongside Spotify and VMware. And it was an incredible success. Like, I think we were given guidance for maybe 50 people or 80 people from the CNCF. And we ended up with something like 200 or 250 people there. So it was a really great event, and it was just incredible to meet the community in person for the first time.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet people in person. Like, it's like there's definitely something that you miss out on over Zoom or, yeah. So, we have a question. What challenge, and this is from Fratin, what challenges do you see in the coming year in terms of open source, and how do you advise to be prepared for that? So, Letitia, I'll start with you. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No, that's right. I think that open source from Postgres is different than open source from a commercial company, because MariaDB, for example, there's a commercial company behind MariaDB. So the company has to make money in order for the open source community to still exist. It's not the case with Postgres, and Postgres is simply done with people happy to write good code and give it back to humanity without any purpose of money behind. So I don't see any challenge because there is no goal. We are just doing code for the beauty of it and opening it. That's all. So there's no challenge here, I think.
And David, do you have any other thoughts on the future of open source?
No, I just would agree. I would agree and echo what Letitia said. I mean, the best open source communities are able to survive because people want to participate and because people want to add value. Commercialization, I think, can act as fuel on the fire and speed things up, but it shouldn't be necessary. And I think that I'm pretty enthusiastic, and I think the open source communities are going to be in a healthy place throughout the next years.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk, I suppose, about the security of open source, but it's more like the realization how all software relies on open source. So it's like, and a lot of the initiatives that I've read about, it's not about taking out open source, it's about trying to understand what are you using and to make sure you're up to date. It's not it's not negative about open source. It's like, no, open source is amazing. And there's no way we're going to take out 80% of our code base. So let's just try to make it secure.
Yeah, it's not going away.
No. So I wonder if we have any more questions from the audience. Does anybody else want to pose a question? Oh, I just have one for you guys. So both EDB and Rody, you guys you're contributing to open source the whole time. Is there ever any like tension there? Like, oh, am I an open source contributor or am I working for a company and getting paid to do that work?
I never asked myself the question. I have goals that I fulfill, and any extra free time is for open source.
Yeah, I think that there's I'm not sure if tension is the right word for it. There's healthy tension in any kind of code base where people are reviewing code and just making sure that the project works for everybody. I think that's a good thing. The important thing to remember is just that, like, and I think people can sometimes forget this when it comes to open source, is that open source is created by humans, and we're all people, and it's sometimes very easy to forget that when you're launching a pull request or creating a GitHub issue on an open source project, that people are people. They're not there to just work for free and provide value to you. And so I think it's best to try and establish some sort of relationship with the maintainers of an open source project, or understand how what the history of the project has been before just firing in your GitHub issue. And I think that kind of keeps things smoothly oiled and helps everybody work together a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely sentiment. And we have one more question. So Angel has said that her friend has just released a Python web framework, Esmeralda, and she wants to know, what would you recommend as open source business model to grow the community? So David, I might put that to you, seeing as you're the founder.
I think I maybe would reverse the question if I could, and I would ask, what can you do to grow the community to the point where it can support a business model? I think that commercialization is kind of the end result of a healthy open source community that's growing well. And so the best way to just grow your community is to support people, to add value and help them achieve what their end goals are in as efficient a way as possible.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think we'll end it up there. So thanks to everybody that's watching. Thanks to our wonderful guests. And thanks to Hillary in the background pulling all those strings. Oh, we have prizes. I have to say the prizes before we go. So if you look at your chat there, their November prize winners are there. So Rushi, Ines, Brian, Max, David, Torsten, Harsha, Jim, and Rob. Okay. So Jim and Rob, you got a free lunch. Harsha, Torsten, David, Max, Brian, and Rushi, you got a prize back. So, not too bad. And again, thank you to our wonderful guests. I could talk to you for much longer, but I think you're a bit busy. Thanks to everybody for watching. And to let you know, next month we have our last webinar of the year on the state of the DevOps for 2022, where we review things that have happened in 2022. And that's on the 15th of December. So hope to see you then. So thanks again for coming. Bye. Till next time.
Bye.